They laughed at the boy for trying to fix the broken motorcycle. When it started, the owner couldn't believe it. Jason Cooper had nothing left to lose when he decided to kneel on the cold floor of Westfield Mall in Chicago. At 22, he carried a worn-out backpack with old tools and a determination few understood. The 1985 Harley-Davidson Sportster 883 had been sitting there for 3 days, abandoned in the mall parking lot. Its owner, businessman Richard Blackwell, shouted to anyone who would listen that this family heirloom was beyond repair. "Get away from there, kid. You'll just make it worse," Richard yelled, adjusting his designer suit as a small crowd began to gather. Jason didn't look up from the rusty parts. His calloused hands moved with precision through the engine components. There was something in his movements that caught the attention of Margaret Wilson, a 68-year-old woman who had just left the pharmacy. "Did you really try everything?" Jason finally looked up at Richard. "Of course I did. 3 different mechanics said it's done for. The engine's seized, the electrical system's fried. It's scrap metal." Margaret stepped closer, watching as the young man examined every detail of the motorcycle. There was something familiar in his gestures, the way he handled the parts with respect and knowledge. A small group of onlookers formed. Some took pictures with their phones, others made snide remarks about the homeless mechanic daring to touch an expensive bike. "Let me try," Jason said simply. "If I can get it running, you give me a chance to explain something important." Richard let out a bitter laugh. "Explain what? How you'll waste even more of my time with this charade? About my father." The words hung in the air like a ticking bomb. Richard felt a chill down his spine but hid it well. "What father? I don't know you." "Robert Cooper. He worked for you for 15 years. Richard's face paled for a moment before his arrogant composure returned. "Never heard of him," he lied shamelessly. Jason turned back to the bike. He pulled an old screwdriver from his backpack and began dismantling the engine panel. Every move was calculated, revealing a skill that even impressed some mechanics from nearby shops. Margaret thought of her late husband, Frank, who had passed 2 years prior. He'd had that same passion for engines, that almost reverent dedication to working with his hands. "Young man," she called softly, "may I ask where you learned this?" "From my dad, ma'am. Since I was little. He always said machines have souls, and when you understand their soul, you can heal them." Richard rolled his eyes dramatically. "What romantic nonsense. An engine's an engine. It either works or it doesn't, and this one hasn't worked in 6 months." "6 months?" Jason paused. "You said it stopped working 6 months ago." "That's right, so what?" A shadow crossed Jason's face. 6 months, exactly how long it had been since his father passed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now back to the story. The crowd grew. Shop employees wandered over during breaks, curious about the commotion. Among them was Jennifer Taylor, manager of a clothing store, who immediately started filming with her phone. "You guys check this out," she said to the camera. "Some random kid pretending to be a mechanic on a bike 3 pros already said was beyond repair." The snide remarks multiplied. Some laughed openly. Others bet on how long it would take for security to kick out the intruder. Jason kept working quietly, ignoring the taunts. He carefully removed the engine cover, and his expression changed. Something was wrong there, something beyond normal wear and tear. "Mrs. Wilson," he called, and the woman was surprised he knew her name. She had introduced herself just minutes earlier. "Have you ever seen marks like these on an engine?" Margaret leaned in to look. In her years alongside her mechanic husband, she had learned to recognize certain signs. "This isn't natural wear," she murmured. "It looks like someone forced these parts." Richard stepped forward quickly. "What are you two whispering about? If you've got something to say it loud enough for everyone to hear." "I was explaining to the lady that these marks on the engine seem like normal wear on an old bike," Richard cut in sharply. "You don't have the experience to know the difference." But Jason had experience, and he recognized sabotage when he saw it. For 20 minutes he worked methodically, taking parts apart, cleaning connections, checking every component. His focus was so intense, it was like he was in another world. Jennifer kept filming, narrating to her followers about what a waste of time this was. The video was going viral with cruel comments about people who don't know their place. "I told you it was pointless," Richard said to the crowd. "This kid has no clue what he's doing. My bike was checked by real professionals." "Professionals like Mike from the Broadway shop?" Jason asked without looking up. Richard choked. "How do you know Mike?" "Because my father worked with him, and because Mike was the one who told me where to find you." The mood grew tense. Richard glanced around, realizing too many people were listening. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. Just like you know this bike didn't break down on its own." Jason reached into the fuel tank and, to everyone's shock, pulled out a small metal piece wrapped in plastic. "What's that?" Margaret asked. "The missing piece that makes this bike run. Someone hid it here, probably so no one could fix it." Richard tried to snatch it from Jason's hand. "That's mine. You have no right to mess with my property." "Hold on," Margaret intervened. "If the part was hidden, someone didn't want this bike to work. Why would anyone do that to their own bike?" The question hung in the air. Richard was visibly sweating, even with the mall's AC blasting. Jason began reassembling the engine, now with the missing piece. His movements grew faster and more precise, showing a technical skill that impressed even the professional mechanics who had gathered. "Where'd you learn that?" one asked. "Never seen anyone work like that." "My father taught me. He said every engine has its own personality. You have to talk to it before you can fix it." "That's nonsense," Richard muttered, but his voice trembled slightly. Margaret watched everything with growing suspicion. There was something off about the businessman's demeanor. He didn't seem worried about his bike, more like afraid it might actually work. "Young man," she said softly to Jason. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course, Mrs. Wilson." "Your father, is he no longer with us?" Jason paused for a moment. His eyes welled up with tears he tried to hide. "He passed 6 months ago. Heart trouble. They say it was from grief, from disappointment." "Disappointment in what?" "The lies they told about him." Richard cleared his throat loudly, trying to cut the conversation short. "Enough with the theatrics. I'm calling security to remove this troublemaker," Richard Blackwell said. "Hold on," Margaret interjected, stepping between Richard and Jason. "Let the boy finish his work. If he actually gets that bike running, I think we'd all like to hear this story about his father." Others in the crowd nodded in agreement. Curiosity had overtaken their initial malice. Jason went back to work, tightening the last bolts, checking the electrical connections, and carefully cleaning the spark plug contacts. His expression was serious, focused, as if performing a sacred ritual. "Done," he finally said, standing up. "Now let's see if she wants to talk to us." He sat on the bike and turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, but didn't start. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the group. "I told you," Richard said, relieved. 3 professionals said it was beyond repair." Jason took a deep breath and tried again. This time the engine coughed louder, spewing black smoke, but still didn't catch. "Let's go, everyone," Jennifer called, still filming. "Show's over, the miracle boy couldn't work his magic." But Jason didn't give up. His father had taught him that sometimes machines need time to remember how to run. On the 3rd try, he made an almost imperceptible adjustment to the throttle, a trick his father had shown him in their last days together. And then it happened. The 1985 Harley-Davidson Sportster 883 didn't just start, it roared. The engine's sound echoed through the entire mall with a power and precision that left everyone speechless. It was a clean, thunderous growl, exactly how a bike like that should sound in perfect condition. Richard turned pale. The crowd, once mocking, now applauded in awe. A few professional mechanics stepped forward to shake Jason's hand, recognizing the exceptional quality of his work. "But how?" Richard stammered. "This is impossible." 3 different mechanics lied to you, Jason finished, turning off the bike, or were paid to lie. The silence was deafening. Everyone waited for an explanation. "What do you mean by that?" Margaret asked. Jason took a deep breath. The moment he'd been preparing for had finally arrived. "My father, Robert Cooper, worked for you for 15 years, he began, staring directly at Richard. He was in charge of maintaining your entire bike fleet. Vintage bikes, rare ones that you bought and restored to sell to collectors. Richard tried to interrupt, but the crowd wouldn't let him. They wanted to hear. 6 months ago, my father found out you were selling those bikes for way more than you reported on taxes. He kept the real invoices because he was an honest man. That's a lie, Richard shouted. When my father tried to talk to you about it, you fired him. And not just fired him, you spread rumors all over town that he was a thief, that he stole bike parts. Jason's voice trembled with emotion. Because of those lies, my father couldn't find work anywhere. No shop would hire a mechanic with a thief's reputation. He spent 6 months watching our family struggle, watching my mother clean houses to keep us afloat, knowing it was all because of a lie. Tears streamed down the young man's face. And in the end, his heart gave out. The doctor said it was a heart attack, but I know it was from grief. My father was known all over town as the best classic bike mechanic, dying with a thief's reputation. That's what killed him inside first. Margaret stepped closer and placed a hand on Jason's shoulder, offering the comfort only a mother could give. Richard was visibly shaken, but struggling to keep his composure. That doesn't prove anything. Your father could have told you a different version of the story. You're right, said Jason, pulling an envelope from his backpack. Words don't prove anything, but documents do. He showed a stack of papers to the crowd. These are copies of all the receipts my father kept. They show the real sale prices of the bikes, and this one, he held up a specific sheet, is proof that this bike was ours. Margaret took the document to examine it. It's a purchase receipt, she read aloud. Harley-Davidson Sportster, 883, 1985 model, sold by Robert Cooper to Richard Blackwell for $2,000. A murmur of surprise spread through the crowd. $2,000 for a bike like this? Questioned one of the mechanics present. This bike is worth at least $15,000 in good condition. Exactly, said Jason. My father sold the bike for half its value because he was desperate, out of work, needing money to buy his heart medication, and Mr. Richard knew that. Richard tried to grab the papers. These documents could be fake. Anyone can forge a receipt. They could, Jason agreed, but they can't forge this. He started the bike again, and to everyone's surprise, a small digital display lit up on the dashboard. My father installed a digital logging system on this bike. He documented everything, every part replaced, every repair, every issue. It was a habit of his. The display showed a list of technical data, maintenance dates, and at the end, a message that made Richard turn completely pale. Last maintenance, Robert Cooper, 02-15-2024. Engine sabotaged on 02-16-2024. Responsible, R. Blackwell. Part removed. Intake valve. Location, inside the tank. The silence was absolute. Even the sounds of the mall seemed to have stopped. My father knew he was going to die, said Jason, his voice trembling. The doctors had warned him his heart was too weak, so he prepared everything. He programmed this bike to tell me the truth when the time came. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now back to the story. Jennifer, who was filming everything, completely changed the tone of her broadcast. Now she was defending Jason and exposing the injustices she had witnessed. Everyone, are you seeing this? She spoke into the camera. This young man isn't a fraud. He's proving his father was wronged. What a brave man. Richard tried one last move. This doesn't prove I sabotaged the bike. Anyone could have tampered with it after I bought it. That's true, Jason agreed. Anyone could. But the system's recording shows exactly who did it. He pressed a few buttons on the digital dashboard, and a small screen began playing a grainy but clear enough video showing Richard removing a part from the bike's engine and hiding it inside the fuel tank. The businessman tried to run, but the crowd itself stopped him, demanding answers. Why did you do this? Someone from the crowd shouted. Richard, seeing no way out, broke down. Because I knew he'd tell everything. Robert found out about the taxes, about how I underreported sales. If he spoke up, I'd lose everything. The business, my family, my reputation. So you chose to ruin his life instead? Asked Margaret, outraged. I didn't want him to. I just wanted him to stay quiet. I offered money, a better job in another city. but he refused. Said he couldn't tolerate dishonesty. The words tumbled out as if Richard were confessing after years of carrying that weight. When he threatened to report me, I spread the lies about him stealing parts. I thought if no one else hired him, he'd depend on me and wouldn't expose me. But it didn't work, said Jason. No, he stayed strong. So I sabotaged the bike. It was the last thing left from the time when you were a happy family. I thought if it didn't work anymore, it would be like erasing the last good memory. The businessman was completely broken, crying like a child. I never thought he would. That his heart. I just wanted him to stop bothering me. Margaret shook her head in disgust. You destroyed an entire family's life over dirty money. The crowd murmured angrily. Some called for the police, while others demanded Richard pay compensation to Robert's family. But Jason surprised everyone. I don't want money, he said firmly. I just want two things. What? Asked Richard, still crying. First, I want you to apologize to my father. But he's right here, Jason interrupted, pointing to his chest. Every son carries his father in his heart. Apologize to him through me. Richard, completely humiliated, knelt before Jason. Robert, I'm sorry. You were an honest man, and I ruined your life out of cowardice. Forgive me. And second? Margaret asked. I want you to tell the truth to the whole city. Clear my father's name. How? Jason looked at Jennifer, who was still recording. Can you help me? Can you post this video and tell the real story? My father deserves for everyone to know the kind of man he really was. Jennifer nodded eagerly. Of course, and I'll do more than that. I'll reach out to every other news outlet in town to share this story. Your father will have his honor restored. You can count on it. Jason then pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Mom, it's Jason. Can you come to the mall? It's done. The truth is out. As they waited, Margaret approached Jason. Son, can I make you an offer? Of course, Mrs. Wilson. I have a small shop that's been closed for 2 years, ever since my husband passed. How about we reopen it? You'd handle the technical work and I'd take care of the business side. Jason's eyes lit up. You'd do that? Would I? I need this. That shop is dying to hear the sound of an engine running again, and I'm dying to have a purpose. Just then, a woman in her 50s came running. It was Helen, Jason's mother. When she saw her son standing next to the running bike, tears of happiness in his eyes, she knew something very important had happened. My son, what did you do? I kept the promise I made to Dad, Mom. I proved he wasn't a thief. Helen hugged her son tightly, and the two cried together in front of the emotional crowd who applauded. Richard approached timidly. Mrs. Cooper, I want to apologize to you too, and I'd like to make amends. I'll transfer the bike's ownership back to you. It never should have left your family. Thank you, Helen said simply. But the most important thing is already done. My husband's name is clear. One of the professional mechanics stepped forward. Kid, you've got a gift. If things don't work out with Mrs. Wilson, I've got a shop and always need good people. Me too, said another. And me, shouted a third. Jason smiled. For the first time in 6 months, he felt the future was possible. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now continuing. 3 months passed. Margaret and Jason's shop was thriving in Chicago's Wicker Park district. They specialized in restoring classic bikes, and their reputation for quality work spread quickly through the city. The 1985 Harley-Davidson Sportster 883 was displayed at the entrance of the shop, polished and gleaming, with a plaque that read, "In memory of Robert Cooper, honest mechanic." Margaret had transformed. After 2 years of depression following the loss of her husband, finding a new purpose had restored her vitality. She arrived at the shop before Jason every morning, made coffee for the customers, and told stories about the days when her husband worked with engines. Jason, she called out one Thursday morning, there's a customer here who wants to talk to you. Jason slid out from under an Indian motorcycle he was restoring and was surprised to see Richard Blackwell standing at the shop's door. The businessman looked different, thinner, less arrogant, with an air of someone who had undergone a profound change. Hi, Jason. May I come in? Of course. What can I do for you? Richard looked around the shop, observing the activity, the satisfied customers, the cheerful and productive work environment. I wanted to propose something to you. Remember when I mentioned the bikes I used to buy and restore? I remember. I have a warehouse full of them. Rare bikes, some very old that I couldn't sell after everything that happened. People don't want to do business with me anymore. Jason waited, unsure where Richard was going with this. I'd like to donate those bikes to you, to the shop. Margaret nearly dropped the coffee cup she was holding. Donate them? What do you mean? I'm trying to make peace with life, with the wrong things I've done. Those bikes are just sitting there, rusting away. Here, they'd have a chance to come back to life. Jason and Margaret exchanged glances. Are there any conditions? Jason asked skeptically. Yes, that you use part of the money you make from them to create a free mechanics course for underprivileged youth, in memory of your father. The proposal left everyone silent. Why do you want to do this? Margaret asked. Richard took a deep breath. Because I learned something after everything that happened. I learned that stolen money doesn't bring happiness. My wife left me when she found out the truth. My children won't speak to me anymore. My friends avoid me. I have a lot of money, but I don't have a life anymore. He paused and looked directly at Jason. Your father was richer than me. He had a family who loved him, a respected reputation, the satisfaction of working honestly. I was jealous of that, and I destroyed it all out of pure spite. Tears began to stream down Richard's face. I can't bring your father back. I can't undo the harm I've caused, but I can try to use what I have left to do something good. Jason looked at Margaret, who nodded. All right, he said, but with one condition of our own. What is it? The course will be called the Robert Cooper School of Mechanics, and you'll come here once a month to teach the students about the importance of honesty in business. Richard smiled for the first time in months. I accept. And so, the Robert Cooper School of Mechanics was born. Within 6 months, it had graduated its first class of 15 young men, all from the outskirts of Chicago, all now employed at respected shops in the city. Margaret became a sort of mother to these boys. She didn't just teach them about engines, she taught them about life, about values, about how honesty always pays off in the end. Richard, true to his word, showed up every month to give his talk. At first, the students greeted him with hostility, knowing his story. But over time, they began to understand that he represented something important, the possibility of redemption, of change, that it's never too late to do the right thing. During one of these visits, Richard brought a surprise. Jason, I have something for you, he said, handing over an envelope. What is it? It's the deed to the warehouse where the bikes are stored. I want to donate the space too. You can expand the school, create more courses. Jason opened the envelope and couldn't speak. The warehouse was worth a fortune. Mr. Richard, this is too much. I can't accept it. Yes, you can, and you should, because I finally understood something your father always knew. True wealth lies in seeing others thrive because of what you've done. That night, Jason went to the cemetery to visit his father's grave. He brought a photo of the new class of students from the school and placed it beside the headstone. Dad, you were right. Honesty always wins in the end. And now your name isn't just cleared, it's respected. 15 families have a better life because of what you taught me. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees around him, and Jason felt certain his father was proud. 2 years later, the Robert Cooper School of Mechanics had become a national benchmark. Young people from all over the United States came to study there, and many of them became successful entrepreneurs, always remembering the values they'd learned. Helen Cooper, who in the first months after her husband's death could barely leave the house, now worked at the school as the academic coordinator. She had started smiling again, found hope, and believed life still held good things. Margaret, at 70, was more active than ever. She and Jason had become a family, united not by blood, but by their love for their work and respect for the memory of loved ones who had passed. Richard continued his monthly visits, But now he was welcomed as a friend. He had rebuilt his life on solid ground, regained his children's respect, and even found new love, a simple woman who loved him for who he'd become, not for what he owned. The 1985 Harley-Davidson Sportster 883 was still parked at the entrance of the shop, but now it wasn't just a memorial. It was a living symbol that the truth always finds a way to come out, that honesty is always rewarded, even if it takes time. One Saturday afternoon, Jason was polishing the bike when a boy about 12 years old approached. "Uncle, is it true that this bike tells stories?" Jason smiled. "It sure is, kid. Want to hear one?" "Yes." "Then sit right here and I'll tell you the story of an honest man who taught his son that work brings dignity, that truth sets you free, and that love builds bridges where malice builds walls." And as he told the story to that bright-eyed boy, Jason realized the greatest legacy his father had left wasn't tools or technical knowledge. It was the certainty that doing good is always worth it, even when no one's watching, even when it seems evil is winning. The bike, now polished and gleaming, reflected the afternoon sun as if it were smiling. And maybe it was. The end of the story. Now tell us what you thought of this moving story of perseverance and justice. Do you believe Jason made the right decisions? Which part touched you the most? Leave your honest comment. We'd love to hear your opinion. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories.